I'm Samuel Moyn. I teach law and history at Yale University. Welcome to my exp. The history of human rights is a drama with two acts. The first act, after the idea of human rights came about in moral philosophy books, is the act that is about revolution and revolutionary rights, and is associated in the first instance with the Atlantic revolutions, the American in 1776 and the French in 1789. Because there's just no doubt that rights were announced, and indeed they were announced as natural in the American case and human in the French. And in fact, in English, it was due to the French Revolution that one of the instigators of the American Revolution really became one of the first to use the phrase rights of man in English when he translated some of the slogans of the French Revolution. The evolution of human rights is actually not one story. It's different stories depending on what problem one is interested in solving. If one starts with the story of who the beneficiaries are, who can claim to be human, that story begins right away after the Atlantic revolutions. In fact, during them, with the claims of blacks, Jews, and women to the new kind of citizenship that white males justify in the name of their humanity while excluding a lot of actual humans. We could also look, if we wanted to understand the evolution of human rights, at the content. Thomas Hobbes announced one right, the right to kill and in the state of nature, and give one's authority to the state and run if the state then pursued you. By the time of the American and French Revolution, there are more rights, including not just John Locke's right to property, but rights of the criminal process. And in France, pioneeringly in 1793, under the new Constitution and new Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen of the Jacobins, there were economic and social rights, rights to things like education and public relief. And in the 19th century, this evolution too continued, especially once working man's movements began to claim new kinds of economic rights, things like the right to work, or demanded safe workspaces or limited working hours. Today, we often think about human rights as entitlements that are most relevant not to our fellow citizens, but to those who are suffering depredations like genocide and poverty abroad. The goal of these new human rights is often not to create the basis of our sovereign state, as occurred in the Atlantic revolutions, but very different, to chasten or even justify interference with the sovereign states of others, and especially in the post-colonial world. And finally, violence has been renounced. In the American and French revolutions, rights justified violence. Now we think of human rights as very frequently a nonviolent movement that involves small group agitation and litigation. It's very interesting to consider why Even though the American Revolution was extraordinarily violent and led to the expulsion of tens of thousands, namely the British loyalists on the losing side, the French Revolution was also notoriously violent, not least in the phase of the terror. No international human rights movement, no United Nations, no international law protecting rights was set up in response. So you might conclude that it was only when the wrong kinds of people, non-whites in the post-colonial world, claimed sovereignty, that some people concluded that sovereignty was problematic. Secondly, socialism began to die as an ideal. Its apogee was in the 1960s and 70s, but it became tarnished for a variety of reasons. And so in the global north, as well as increasingly in the global south, it came to seem as if there could be no humane form of socialism. And after 1968, many people who had been socialists begin to adopt and embrace the idea of human rights as a new slogan that will capture and recapture some of the idealism of socialism without incurring some of the costs and risks.